The cufflink and the locked study. Maya opened the apartment door and froze. An engraved cufflink lay on the kitchen counter, brass catching the leftover glow from a street lamp through the blinds. Suspicion tightened her throat as she crouched and read the tiny initials on the face, initials that did not belong to her. She set her bag down without thinking and went straight to the study door where a thin pool of light spilled beneath the gap. "Ethan," she called. Voice even but hard enough to cut through the quiet. Her call met only the muffled clack of keys and the rustle of papers. The light under the door did not flicker. Maya had no time for slow dread. The cufflink was a physical fact, not a feeling, and facts demanded answers. She slid her fingers around the metal and felt a smear of oil on the back. Someone had handled it recently. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. She walked the apartment in small, deliberate steps, looking for anything else that did not belong. The kitchen felt too quiet, the living room too arranged. Each step made the suspicion grow sharper, a secret life or a lie carefully wrapped in success. She found Ethan in the study 5 minutes later, standing behind his desk with his back to her and a laptop open to a spreadsheet that listed cities, investors, and dates. He did not notice her at first. Maya watched the way his shoulders tightened as he scrolled. When he turned, his face was controlled. "Ethan, whose cufflink is this?" she asked. His eyes flicked to the cufflink on the counter, then to her. He crossed the room with slow steps and picked up the cufflink without meeting her gaze. "Business. A gift from an investor. I must have dropped it when I came home last night," he said. His voice was low and measured. Doubt softened into a new H as Maya pushed the study door open farther and stepped inside. "You had the light on late," she said. She kept her sentences short because long ones allowed excuses to settle. Why was the door locked? Ethan set the cufflink on the desk and touched the engraved initials once, almost absent-mindedly. "Reports. I had to finish projections." "You know how it is, Ethan. This is a cufflink with a woman's initial." Maya's words came quicker now. "I don't recognize the engraving." "You didn't tell me you were celebrating with anyone last night." She resisted the impulse to turn the cufflink over in her fingers again. Her voice betrayed a tremor. Ethan closed a hand around the cufflink and answered with a shrug that aimed for calm and landed somewhere else. "Maya, we talked about priorities. I can't explain every meeting, it's just work." He kept his answers brief and controlled, and the control itself felt like a screen. Nora arrived that morning with coffee and blunt questions. She set the cups down hard on Maya's small table and watched her friend without ceremony. "Show me." And Nora. Maya pushed the cufflink across the table and watched Nora's eyes trace the initials. Nora did not waste words. "We checked the study. Now?" she said. Her hand dropped to Maya's arm in a way that returned steady pressure like a brace. Maya found herself saying yes, the word small but decisive. Inside the study door, they paused at the threshold. Nora's knuckles rapped the wood once before Maya turned the knob. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper. A laptop hummed low on the desk. Shelves held awards and framed photographs, some of a younger Maya and Ethan in a cramped kitchen, smiling with flour on their hands. That image should have reassured Maya. Instead, it pressed like evidence of a life being edited. Nora moved first, eyes scanning the shelves and the stack of folders on the credenza. "Look for anything out of place," she said. Her tone left no room for argument. They found a small, plain binder tucked behind glossy annual reports. Maya's fingers closed around the spine and brought it into the light. Inside were corporate headshots mounted on cardstock. Maya flipped through and felt the color drop out of the room as she recognized herself in 2 photographs, once standing beside Ethan at a launch, once cropped out so only Ethan remained. Some prints had small notations in a neat hand. "Image repositioning, remove spouse when public." Maya's mouth went dry. "Ethan," she said, but Ethan had not followed them into the study. Nora folded the paper and handed it to Maya without a word. Maya's suspicion shifted to something sharper: fear. The binder implied a deliberate choice, not a careless omission. She remembered nights when they had both fallen asleep on the sofa after long shifts and had promised each other things in whispers. Now a printed note told her those promises could be erased with a stapler and a press release. Maya closed the binder, fingers white on the cardboard. "How long?" she asked. Nora's eyes were steady. "We press him now, Maya. We don't wait." Confrontation followed the outline of a practiced argument. Ethan arrived home that evening later than he had said. He found Maya in the hallway armed with the binder, her stance open and deliberate. "Ethan, why are there photos of me removed from company materials?" she demanded. He took a breath and answered with the same control he had shown before. "We needed a cleaner brand image." He said, "This isn't about you. This is about perception." His voice tried for reason and landed on stone. "Perception." Maya's laugh was short and sharp. "Perception paid with our nights and our savings. It's our life. You can't just edit me out." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maya, you know what we built." She cut him off by stepping closer. "I built things with you, Ethan. My name is on the lease, on the early contracts. This," she tapped the binder shoved under her arm, "this is a plan to erase me from the story you tell the world." He answered with brief sentences, one after another. "We are protecting revenue. We are streamlining messaging. I'm asking you to trust me." The rhythm of his speech had become a protective pattern. Maya felt a shift again. From fear into anger that tasted like metal. "Trust," she repeated. "When did trust start to mean obedience?" There were 3 rapid exchanges then. "Maya, Ethan, Maya," each line blunt and landing like punches. "Ethan, did you sign anything that removes my name?" "Maya." He looked at his hands and then away. Not alone, the legal team advised. He stopped, aware of how the sentence might sound. Maya's heartbeat pushed at her ribs. She swung the binder onto the desk and flipped it open to the page with her cropped photograph. Nora stood at the doorway, hands folded, watching the room like a jury. The next event came from an angle neither of them had expected. Ethan's assistant, Lara, intercepted Maya the following night when Maya tried to reach the company's headquarters. Lara met her in the lobby with a small, ambiguous smile and a folder folded under her arm. "Mrs. Cole, we weren't expecting you tonight," Lara voiced calm. She slid a card across to Maya and did not look away. "If you need anything clarified, the PER team will meet with you tomorrow at 9. Maya took the card as if it might be hot. Lara's posture made it clear she spoke for forces bigger than Ethan's excuses. Maya's doubt circled back and sharpened into a new kind of clarity. Ethan's changes at allies. Lara's smile had been polite but contained an interior lockbox of reasons. That evening, Nora and Maya sat at the kitchen table and set out a list of questions on a napkin. Each name and date was a small attack, a way to demand explanation. "Call him, Nora, call him, and don't stop until we have answers." Maya dialed and listened to the ring vibrate under her palm. When Ethan finally answered, he kept his voice controlled. "Maya, I told you I'm at the office." Maya moved through the apartment like someone testing the floor for gaps. Alone at night, she returned to the study and waited for the house to settle before she slid the door open. She crouched and pulled a loose floorboard in the corner she had once used to hide small bills. Under the wood lay a thin manila folder with a neat printed title. Public Persona and Spousal Visibility. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside were memos and a floor plan of their apartment with notes. Camera angles, background staging, suggested wardrobe. On the margin in Ethan's handwriting, a list read: remove personal references, limit spouse mentions. Stage home shots. Maya read the words twice as if repetition could make them less injurious. A new twist arrived that bent the shape of the fight. Among the documents was a glossy headshot of Maya with her name stamped over it in a different ink. Someone had forged a version of her signature at the bottom of a contract clause that limited her public identity. The signature used a slightly firmer hand and a blue pen that did not match her own slim writing. Maya pressed her thumb to the ink until the pad of her finger carried the smell of printer toner and paper. The discovery turned suspicion into a cold resolve. She would not let legal language decide her presence. Maya took one concrete action. She made copies of the documents with her phone camera, photographed page by page, and sent them to Nora. "Nora, look at the margin notes. Look at the signature." Her messages arrived as a short flurry. Nora answered with immediate bluntness. "Get counsel, don't sign anything. Meet me in 1 hour." An external event again. Nora's arrival at Maya's door with a small envelope and a card for a lawyer she trusted. Nora's decisions moved the story. She refused to wait. The next escalation came fast. Maya demanded that Ethan meet in the boardroom that night. She drove to the glass building where their company worked late into the night, the city lights painting the glass cold and distant. Ethan met her under the building's atrium light, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He led her up to the boardroom where city windows made their city a grid of luminous squares. He closed the door behind them. The room smelled of lemon polish and coffee gone stale. Maya set the binder down on the glass table and opened it to the page with her cropped photographs. The confrontation in the boardroom was the loudest moment of the night. Maya's sentences were clipped and precise. "Ethan, did you sign away my public identity?" she asked. He answered with a steady, controlled cadence. "We streamlined the brand," he said. "I never meant to erase you personally." His words landed like flat stones. The phrasing claimed practicality while the act had been personal. Maya pushed a paper toward him with a finger. "This clause bears my signature in blue ink." "This is legal." He took the paper, read, and met her eyes. That signature could have been added during a review round. "I can't account for every edit." His reply stripped the moment of apology and replaced it with a corporate shrug. Maya's emotional arc shifted again as anger turned sharp into a decision. She stood up and paced the length of the table, palms flat on the cool surface. "Ethan, we made sacrifices together. If you remove me from the public face of this company, you remove the part of our life that mattered when there was nothing else." He answered with 3 short sentences aimed at closing the gap. "Maya, our public image secures investors. My choices protect the company. You can be visible privately." A pause followed. Ethan's measured voice faltered only slightly when he added, "I thought I was protecting us." The admission was small, but it did not bridge the distance. Maya did not beg. She spoke with the steadiness of someone cataloging breaches. "Protecting us does not mean you get to rewrite our past without telling me. You don't get to decide which photographs stay and which vanish. You do not get to sign my name away." Her hands were flat on the table. Nora watched from the doorway. Lara's earlier smile played at the edges of Maya's memory. The boardroom's glass reflected them back, not as montage but as physical people in a room where decisions could be made. Ethan's face tightened and then cooled. He set the paper down and offered an ultimatum that sounded practiced. "Maya, choose. You can accept limits on public visibility and continue with the life we've rebuilt, or you can step aside and let the company push forward without you." The words landed like an exposed hinge. Maya felt heat rise through her ribs, but she kept her reply short. "I will not sign away my name," she said. The boardroom exchange ended with a small, decisive action that closed the chapter's main clash. Ethan walked to the window and looked out at the city, the neon grid unblinking. He did not raise his voice, then prepare for consequences. There are legal pathways to enforce the brand, he said. He left the paper on the table and left the lights on. Maya left the building into rain that started as thin threads and thickened into sheets by the time she reached the curb. She had no umbrella. She let the water soak the hem of her coat and the gold locket at her throat. On the damp sidewalk, she slid her worn wedding band off and held it in her palm. The metal felt familiar and small, a physical object she could name. She pressed it into Nora's hand when Nora found her under the street lamp. "Keep it, Maya, for now." Nora would not have let her keep the ring if she had meant to give it away. Back in the apartment, a late sign of danger arrived. Nora pulled a folded document from Maya's purse as she went to set down Maya's keys. The paper was thin and edged with the faint fold of having been hidden. Nora unfolded it and her face stiffened. There in blue ink was a clause that bore Maya's name and a signature in a hand that did not match Maya's habitual slant. Nora read the clause aloud in a clipped voice. Maya River agrees to limit public references to spouse during promotional events. Nora's fingers tapped the paper twice. "This is a legal restriction," she said. Maya took the document and pressed her thumb to the signature. It sat under her skin like a foreign coin. She felt the chapter close not with an answer but with another question that required resources and proof. The discovery moved the fight into a legal arena. "We get a lawyer tomorrow. Nora, we file a notice. We demand an audit of edits and signatures." Their voices were low but purposeful. Each instruction was an action. By the time dawn began to pale the sky, Maya sat at the small wooden table and laid out the papers she had photographed. Headshots, a floor plan, the cufflink with its unfamiliar initials. She catalogued each item in a column on a scrap of paper. Her hands did not tremble the way they had the night before. Resolve had replaced the early wash of fear. She had moved from suspicion to clarity, from doubt through fear to decisions that required documents and witnesses. Nora slept on the sofa, a jacket across her knees, breathing measured and steady in the way of a friend who keeps watch. The chapter ended with a concrete, pressing beat. Nora folded the blue ink contract and slid it across the table to Maya. "This is yours," she said, voice steady. "Not theirs to sign away." Maya took the paper, placed it on top of the photographs, and pushed the cufflink beside it. She tucked the wedding band into her palm and felt the cool metal. She'd not say anything grand. She did not promise a future. She only reached for her phone and called the lawyer Nora had brought. The line clicked. Someone answered. That single connection moved the conflict into the next stage. The night had brought discovery, confrontation, and a legal threat newly visible. The city outside their window carried on, indifferent, its lights arranging themselves into patterns that meant nothing and everything at once. After hours evidence, Maya shoved the glass door of Ethan's corner office and grabbed the engraved cufflink off the corner of his desk before the nausea could settle in her stomach. Suspicion sat like a hard bead behind her ribs. It had been building since the cufflink in her apartment. Now a hotel reservation with unfamiliar initials lay face up beside it. She held the brass piece between thumb and forefinger and felt the cool indentation of letters she didn't know. That certainty, suspicion pushed her across the room toward the dark leather chair where Ethan's laptop still glowed. She had not come here to break anything. She had come because the cufflink at home had not matched any of her husband's things, because she had found receipts and a dinner tab that did not add up, and because late that afternoon Claire from Ethan's team had hesitated when Maya about after-hours spending. Maya had checked her phone twice on the elevator, read the short text from Nora, bring receipts, and then walked straight into the corner office to catch a man who, until recently, had been the center of her daily life. Maya turned the cufflink over. The initials were precise. 2 letters, clean and familiar in their shape, but not hers. She scanned the desk. A hotel confirmation printed neatly on company paper, a pen where Ethan always kept one, a credit card slip tucked behind a marketing brief. She moved with quick, small actions, lifting, checking, snapping a photo, because moving felt safer than waiting for a response. Her hands trembled. She tucked the cufflink into her palm and slid the reservation into her bag. She heard the elevator ding before she heard Ethan's footsteps. She closed the laptop with a gesture sharp enough to echo across the glass walls. Ethan opened the office door with his coat over one arm and a phone pressed to his ear. He saw her and his face narrowed into the careful shape she had come to recognize when he wanted to control a room. Ethan's voice was low. He tried to make it measured. "What are you doing here?" Maya did not step back. "Ethan, whose initials are on this?" she asked, and she held up the reservation where he could read the letters. Ethan's jaw tightened. He dropped a phone into his pocket and crossed the room in 2 strides. "Maya, put that down. This is private." Is it private, Ethan?" Maya cut in. Her voice had a short edge. "There was a cufflink on my counter and a charge on your card I don't recognize. Who is CR?" Ethan exhaled once, eyes moving from her face to the cufflink in her hand. That paused, the first small crack in his practiced calm. He reached for the cufflink as if to take it, then stopped. "Maya, it's not what you think." She stepped into his space and put both palms flat on the desk. "Then tell me what it is, Ethan. Tell me now." He opened his mouth and closed it. For a breath, he looked as if he might tell the truth. Instead, he wrapped his coat tighter and began to minimize. "Maya, the dinners were investor meetings. The reservation is for a guest speaker, someone I met through the fund. Claire booked it. You know how these things go. She watched his mouth shape the words and the way his eyes avoided meeting hers. Doubt inched into anger. Her pulse picked up. She felt the shift from suspicion to a new worry. Was he hiding something deeper than a meeting? She had expected denial, but not this particular kind of distance. A practiced distance that excused private life for public necessity. The elevator doors opened behind Ethan and Claire stepped out with a stack of folders. She saw them and froze. Maya turned to Claire. Claire, did you book after-hours dinners on Ethan's card? Claire swallowed. Her hands made a small, nervous movement with the folders. Yes, they were off the record dinners. I booked them under expenses. Nora's text had been right. Bring receipts. Maya's mouth went dry. The action of Claire admitting the dinners shifted the scene. What had been a suspicion now became an accusation with witnesses. Ethan shifted his weight and looked at Claire as if trying to move the blame. Why didn't you tell me, Ethan? Why didn't you tell me about these people? Maya's voice was higher now, pulled taut. I didn't think it mattered, Maya. It was work, it's complicated. Ethan's answer was short and clean, the kind he used when he wanted the room to stop asking questions. Nora arrived in the corridor, reins still on her shoulders from the walk over. She did not look at Ethan. She looked only at Maya and then at the scattered papers on the desk, Maya and Nora, and there was a concrete steadiness to her that made Maya unclench slightly. Nora, we need the expense reports and the screenshot you pulled. Now, Maya handed over a printed bank ledger and a screenshot of a dinner confirmation. The screenshot showed a reservation under Ethan's corporate card for a private room the previous week. The name on the guest line matched the initials on the cufflink C. Maya felt the next shift, clarity sliding in over the initial fog of suspicion and doubt. Ethan, your card was used for private dinners with CR. Nora plainly, Claire booked it. Ethan's mouth tightened. He tried to step between them and the open office, but Maya moved past him toward the reception elevator. The scene was no longer private. The building hummed with late-night energy, and Maya could feel that in the scrape of heels and the soft murmur of voices beyond the glass. They reached the elevator. Ethan's hand found the call button and held it like a shield. Maya, not here, he said. We can talk upstairs, away from people. No, Maya, we will talk here, where people can see that you are not telling the whole story. Her sentence landed hard. His eyes flicked to the mirrored elevator doors and the faint reflection of the people waiting. The stakes escalated as the hallway became public ground. The elevator doors slid open, colleagues glanced up. Ethan moved quickly toward another floor where an investor reception had already started. Maya followed. She ignored the polite murmurs and the discreet looks. She kept moving because moving was how she kept control of the facts. Her legs felt leaden, but each step sharpened the focus in her chest. At the reception, the room smelled of wine, citrus, and polished wood. The glass wall framed the city lights like a row of bright teeth. Ethan folded into the crowd with the ease of a man who had learned how to perform success. Maya pushed forward past clusters of people, went around waiters, and stopped on the threshold where the light caught on Ethan's engraved cufflinks, the same brass tone that had been in her hand. She called his name, Ethan, the syllable cut through quiet conversations. A group of investors turned. Ethan's smile arrived but did not reach his eyes. Maya, please. Not now. He put a hand briefly on her arm, a practiced gesture. She stepped back and looked him straight in the face. Ethan, whose initials are on your cufflink? She said loud enough for several heads to turn. A hush slid across the reception. Glass chimed somewhere. Ethan scanned the room for a way out. He did not find one. He tried to explain, voice low at first, then faster. Maya, I have been under a lot of pressure. You know what this company needed. Those dinners were for introductions, strategic conversations. I couldn't drag you into every meeting. He used the word strategic as if the syllable could fix things. Nora moved to Maya's side, hand on her elbow. Claire stood near the back of the room, eyes down, clutching a folder. Several attendees craned their necks to see. The city glittered behind them, indifferent. Ethan's tone hardened when the people in the room made the situation public. This is not the place, it is the place, Maya. It is the place because you put me outside of it, Ethan. You put your decisions where I couldn't see them. Who is Segar? Her voice did not tremble now. It was a series of controlled questions. A man at a nearby table cleared his throat and said, Is everything all right? The question was small and real and made the tension visible. Ethan met Maya's gaze, and for a moment the practiced mask dropped. He looked old in that instant, worn at the edges by choices he had been making alone. I haven't been honest, Maya. Not with how much time I've been spending away, not how have you let work shape me. The confession pushed the room closer. Conversations halted. Maya felt a new emotion arrive, betrayal hot and precise. Moving from the memory of a cufflink on her kitchen counter to the man in front of her admitting that he had let distance grow and kept secrets. She could list the concrete incidents. Dinner she had not been told about, late nights, the way his hand found his phone first when a call came in. Each detail tightened the sense that what they had built was being chipped away not by one act but by accumulation. Ethan, you said you were protecting us, Maya. You made sacrifices together. Who did you think you were protecting? He ran a hand through his hair. I thought I was protecting the company. I thought if I could secure this next round, none of our old problems would come back. I thought I could make it so we never had to go back to those nights counting receipts. So you cut me out and you called that protection. Maya? Ethan's replies came faster now. I didn't cut you out on purpose. I made choices under pressure. I made deals I thought were necessary. Nora stepped forward, voice steady. Maya, look at the dinner dates and the card charges. She handed a small packet of documents to Maya. These show private dinners, same restaurant, same table numbers. Ethan, these were billed as investor meetings, but were not logged with legal. Claire, why didn't you log them? Claire's hands shook. I was told to keep certain items off the books. I thought it was temporary. I didn't think. She stopped under Nora's look. The assistant's admission changed the shape of the argument. The problem was no longer only personal. The ledger suggested a pattern that could have legal and public consequences. Maya felt fear now, not only of personal loss but of the professional exposure that could pull their lives apart in ways that reached beyond them. That fear shifted again into a quiet, resolute planning in her chest. She needed to know the full scope before she decided what to do. Someone murmured about confidentiality. A voice from the crowd said, "Is this going to affect the round?" The business question underlined how their private rupture had immediate public costs. Ethan's shoulders knotted. A pocket of silence formed. Maya took a breath and then asked a direct, practical question. "Ethan, did you sign anything? Did you put your name on any agreements?" He hesitated. There were non-disclosure arrangements. There were handshake understandings. "Nothing signed in my name beyond normal filings." "Then we'll all find out." "Nora, Maya, I pulled company expenses. We can map dates and card uses." Claire's admission is proof someone was ordering and hiding the bills. "We'll trace it at that." A man in a dark suit approached and whispered to Ethan. Ethan's face went tight. He turned to the crowd and said, "I need to step out for a moment." Maya watched him go. He disappeared through a glass door. She felt sudden cold. The decision to follow him thrummed through her. Nora put a hand on her back and guided her toward the exit. "Let him go for now." Nora quietly, "We'll pull the records." The words steadied Maya enough to let her accept a short retreat. Outside, rain had begun to fall in soft sheets that caught the city's light. Maya did not notice the rain at first. Her attention was on the way Ethan had left, on the loop of fear and betrayal that had widened in minutes into something that touched both their private life and their public standing. She folded her arms around herself and felt the metal of the cufflink heavy in her palm. Nora handed Maya a small stack of printed receipts. "I have timestamps, call logs, the reservation. Claire will confirm under oath if needed. We can make this factual." Nora's voice was clipped and businesslike. It reminded Maya of the woman who had once helped her write a resume and now stood ready to help unravel the truth. Maya read the receipts aloud, naming restaurants, dates and times. Each line was an event. Each event pushed her further from the assumption that this was an isolated mistake. She remembered the first cufflink on her kitchen counter from the night before, the memory from the other chapter, and the way she had crouched to read the initials. The memory sat next to the list of receipts and made a straight line. They did not return to the reception. Instead, Nora insisted on taking Maya back to Ethan's suite to speak with Claire in private. On the corridor landing, Claire mumbled, "I'm sorry," and handed over a folder of communications. "I was told to follow instructions." "I didn't think they'd be used this way." The folder contained messages, notes, and a short line from Ethan asking to keep certain dinners off the books. The proof rearranged what Maya had thought she knew about Ethan's motives. The twist changed the way she understood his earlier denials. What looked like excuses now read like directed secrecy. Maya sat on the edge of a faded couch in Ethan's waiting area and ran her fingers around the cufflink. Her hands had steadied. She had moved from suspicion, through doubt and fear, into a clear pattern of betrayal supported by documents. She felt anger now, bright and scheduling itself into decisions. She looked up when Ethan re-entered the corridor. He stopped when he saw the three of them. "Maya, we can talk privately." He said, "No, Maya, we will not have private conversations that leave me blind to public risk." "We've already crossed that line." Ethan's face flushed. "So what do you want? To humiliate me in front of investors? To throw away everything we built?" "I want the truth," Maya answered. "I want to know who CR is. I want to know what you agreed to." "I want the expense trail explained." Ethan's reply came in a rapid string. "CR is a consultant. CR is a contact I made through an investor. CR helped open doors. I thought the introductions were worth it. I didn't see how far it would go." "Who is CR, Ethan?" "Say the name." Maya's demand cut the space between them. He looked away. He would not say it. That refusal made something inside Maya harden. The choice to stop protecting him with silence. Nora's hand tightened once on Maya's shoulder in silent support. Maya stepped forward and raised her voice enough for the corridor to hear. "Ethan Cole, did you lie to me?" Ethan's response was a single sentence, fast and heavy. Yes, the confession landed. It was not elegant and it did not fix things. But it was a clear sign that he could no longer keep the same defenses. The admission shifted emotion again. Anger softened into a stark calculation. Maya had the evidence and the admission now. She would have to decide whether to confront him further, to involve legal counsel, or to walk away. They left the building in a drizzle that made the city lights blur into short streaks. At the curb, Nora insisted Maya call her lawyer contact, catalog every document. "Don't decide tonight, Maya. Sleep on it, gather facts, and then decide." And Nora. Maya wanted to make a decisive act, pack his clothes, change the locks, but the rules in her chest said to wait until facts were assembled. She felt the tension between immediate action and careful planning. That tension became a working plan: collect evidence, verify, then confront publicly with facts. They parted under the awning of a deli. Nora hugged Maya briefly, fingers pressing between Maya's shoulder blades, a physical steadiness rather than words. I won't let you do this alone, Nora. Maya walked home with the cufflink in her pocket and the printed receipts folded in her bag. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the jasmine from a small plant on the windowsill. She set the folder on the kitchen table and sat down heavily. The city hummed through the windows. She opened her phone and saw a missed call from Ethan, one short ring and then nothing, no explanation. She laid the cufflink on the table and pushed a chair back. In the drawer, she kept the receipt from the night they had counted coins to buy groceries during the early days of the company. She pulled that receipt out and tapped it against her knee. The contrast between that modest paper and the neat hotel reservation now on her table sharpened the sense of betrayal into a history of shifting priorities. Before she could sink into a plan, a knock sounded the door. Maya froze. She checked the peaful. No one? She opened the door and found an envelope on the welcome mat. No return address. She brought it inside and slit it open. Inside was a single glossy business card with the initials CO embossed in gold. There was no message, no number, only the initials and an understated hotel logo on the back. The card's presence was a concrete intrusion. It confirmed the reach of what she had discovered and suggested that the situation might not remain private. The card moved the story forward in a way that left a question hanging: who had sent it and why now? Maya sat at the kitchen table, the cufflink warm from her palm. Nora called from the other end of the line and asked the simple question. What do you want to do now? Maya looked at the documents and then at the business card. She felt a final shift that evening from shock and betrayal toward a careful determination to protect herself and the life she had helped build. She closed the wallet of receipts and slid the card under the cufflink where both items would lie together. The next morning she would open every file, call the lawyer Nora recommended, and demand a full accounting at the company. She would not yet decide whether to leave Ethan, but she would no longer accept being shut out of decisions that shaped both their lives. The chapter ends with Maya placing the card and the cufflink into a small dish by the door and setting the folder of receipts beside them, a set of physical objects that contained the facts she needed. The apartment was quiet, the documents were not. The anonymous card on the table made it clear that the consequences would reach beyond their home and into the offices and investors who had a stake in Ethan's choices. She turned off the lamp and lay down with the folder on the table where she could see it, the evidence waiting for morning and for the choices she would make then. The contract and the choice. Maya stepped onto the rooftop just as Ethan finished his line and the room broke into applause. His hand rose palm outward and he smiled at the crowd without turning toward her. Betrayal tightened her jaw before she had time to think. The cufflink she had found earlier hummed in her bag like a question. She had come wearing the dress she bought for their first anniversary in the tiny apartment where they had mapped everything by candlelight. Now the stage lights washed Ethan in cool blue and pale gold, and the distance between them felt deliberate. She had a clear purpose the moment she took the stairs. Confront him in front of the investors he had been courting, make him explain the initials, the hotel reservation, the cufflink. Suspicion drove her forward. Maya moved through clusters of guests the way a tide finds a channel, hands tight on the strap of her clutch, scanning for any sign that he would step off the platform and meet her. The vendors clinked glasses. A server brushed past her with a tray of oysters. She smelled lemon oil and perfume and the faint residue of the night's catering. Nora. Maya found her friend by the bar, arms crossed, a look that meant both impatience and readiness. He didn't even. Maya began. I saw it. Nora, you go get him. Now Nora's voice was quick. She planted that steady hand on Maya's elbow the way she always did when words had to become action. They threaded the crowd. Ethan was speaking into a microphone, turning a sentence about growth into a measured promise. Thank you, he said, and the room laughed politely at a joke about scaling teams. He accepted applause, stepped down from the raised dais, and moved toward the glass wall that framed a sliver of city. He did not look back. Maya's throat closed tight. Her heart was a hard thing in her chest. The word betrayal moved from suspicion to hot anger in one effortless shift. She intercepted him in a narrow service corridor behind the stage, where the city's noise muffled to a low hum. The corridor smelled of floor cleaner and the metallic tang of show lighting. Ethan turned when she stepped into the fluorescent strip, and his expression changed from keynote polish to something clipped. Ethan, Maya. She folded her hands to steady them. Why didn't you acknowledge me out there? He pinched the bridge of his nose. Maya, this is not the time. His voice was low, measured, his go to when he wanted to control a situation. You don't get to choose time for everything, she said, not after the cufflink. Not after finding reservations with initials that aren't mine, not after the papers I pulled from your desk. Her words landed blunt and concrete. She leaned closer so he couldn't ignore the lines at the corner of her eyes. Explained Julian Park's initials on a hotel booking. She the name aloud because saying it made it more real. Ethan's jaw tightened. Maya, you shouldn't have taken. She laughed without humor. Ethan, Julian Park is your investor. That cufflink has J.P. on it. You left it at my kitchen counter. Do you think I made it up? Nora stepped forward. Maya, say exactly what you need. Don't let him wrote this. She set a hand on Maya's shoulder and gave a small curt push. Ethan's hands rose in a placating gesture. I understand how that looks. I do, but this is about perception. Our private life becoming public would complicate the brand. I'm managing optics, Maya. That's my responsibility now. Your responsibility, Maya echoed. The word landed like a stone. What about our responsibility? He didn't answer at first. Then he said, we built something that matters. You know that his voice was flat with effort. I made decisions that protect that. The corridor hummed. A server's cart squeaked by. Maya realized then that the problem was not only the cufflink. The problem was a pattern she had been naming in smaller ways for months. The quick text replies, the late nights. The way Ethan's hands found his phone before they found hers at the kitchen counter. The suspicion that had first pricked at her after the cufflink shifted into clarity. His absence was a deliberate choice to hide her. Julian, keep family off the stage. Ethan added finally, voice low, it was a business choice, Maya. That's all, so you signed documents that cut me out. Maya, her palm went to the small gold locket at her throat as if it could anchor her. She recalled the cufflink on her counter and the hotel reservation from Chapter 2 and the night she had slipped into his office and snatched the cufflink from the desk. The memory was a concrete action. She had put her fingers on the cool brass and felt the engraved initials press a question into her skin. Ethan's shoulders dropped. There are agreements. We have to present a clean cap table. Investors are afraid of personal complexity. He looked away, toward the boardroom door at the end of the corridor, like it was a destination he could step into and become someone else. It's not about you. That line was the one that made Maya hear the truth otherwise. It was precisely about her. The emotion shifted again from clarity to hurt that was so sharp it made her breathe shallowly. She pressed her fingers against the locket until her knuckles whitened. Nora stepped forward. Ethan, you promised we would decide together. You promised. Her tone was even, but the muscles at her jaw were set. Maya deserves to know what you signed. Nora's voice was the kind that cut through polished excuses. He gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. You don't understand the scale of this meeting. He named Julian Park like a spell. Julian will pull if the narrative is messy. You want to know what that costs, Maya? You want us to lose this? At the cost of our marriage? Maya's question was a whisper that carried. He opened his mouth and closed it. The corridor felt too small for the weight of the conversation. At that moment, lights dimmed in the ballroom and a staff member passed with a clipboard. They watched, both of them watching. Maya followed Ethan the way someone runs after a closing door. She wanted the boardroom instead of the corridor. She wanted proof. She wanted the signed papers she remembered seeing spread on his desk. He led them through a service stair and down to the glass-walled boardroom that overlooked the city. The room was colder here, climate-controlled. The city lights outside threw shards of neon across the polished table. Ethan met an investor halfway through a handshake, Julian Park, who had the sort of practiced smile used to buying stakes and shaping narratives. Julian's grip was firm. Ethan, good work out there. Maya slipped behind a door and watched through a pane of glass. She kept to the outside of the room, pressed to the wall, the glass warm under her palm. She heard Julian's voice, lower, businesslike. Keep family off the stage. Keep personal ties out of board reports. We need a clear public ownership story. He tapped a pen against the table in a way that made the sound pinprick sharp in her ear. The meeting continued with terms and percentages, phrases like restructured equity and protecting valuation. Maya's vision narrowed to those terms like an instrument. She understood numbers in the way someone understands the faces of the people they love. Every change meant an altered shape of their life. When the investor left, Maya slipped into the room. Papers still sat in a pale stack on the table, a manila folder with a neat typed label and signatures at the bottom of several pages. Olivia, Ethan's assistant, was packing her laptop at the corner of the room. She looked up fast and surprised, and then with a small, controlled expression of apology, Ms. Rivera. Maya didn't move like she normally would. She crossed the room and picked up the folder. The paper was heavier than she expected under her fingertips. She opened it and scanned down to the signature block. There it was, her name printed and a line where her signature had been, and next to it a clause that reduced her voting stake and removed her from decision-making committees. The effect was immediate and concrete. The marriage they had said was a partnership existed now as a legal arrangement where her rights were diminished. Ethan, she said. Her voice was low but steadier. The earlier shaking had calmed into focus. Why did you sign this? Ethan didn't answer at once. He stared at the papers, then at the cityscape beyond the glass, and his face looked like a man considering a map. I thought I was protecting us. I thought. He stopped. The words hung unfinished. Julian reappeared at the doorway, hand to his phone, everything in place. Good. We realigned. His eyes flicked between them and registered a rawness he hadn't been meant to see. Olivia hovered at the side. Miss Cole, I can retrieve the earlier drafts if you... She couched her offer in professional calm. Maya slapped the folder onto the table. The papers fanned open and the signatures showed like a list of decisions that had happened without her. You call this protecting? You cut my name out of the company you told me we built together. Ethan's reply came in rapid burps now, like he was trying to fit a careful speech into a small space. Maya, you have to understand that when investors ask for one founder to step back from operations, it stabilizes the board. Julian wanted a single public face. I wanted to protect the product and the team, not to erase you. Then why didn't you tell me? Maya, why change the signatories without saying a word? The boardroom became a pressure cooker. Nora's hand squeezed Maya's arm until the muscles at her forearm tightened. Ethan, tell her everything now. Nora's voice was short. Don't let him edit what counts. The tension rose. This confrontation was where decisions would be forced into sunlight. Ethan's voice hardened. I did what I thought was necessary. You can litigate Maya, but the process is complex. It will take months. In the meantime, the company will move forward. Maya's hands trembled. She pulled the locket out and opened it with the tip of her thumb. Inside was a faded photograph of the two of them at a messy table, smiling with flour on their cheeks from the early days. That picture was proof that they had built something on both effort and intimacy. She set the locket on the papers as if it were a talisman. You talk about process, Maya, you call me by my name in legal blocks. But you keep me out of the decisions that shape our life. There's protecting, that's replacement. Julian watched, impassive like a referee keeping score. Then he said, Ethan, if Maya signing on formally creates any perception problems, we will need to reevaluate. His voice was courteous, but the threat was clear. He stepped back toward the door. That moment was a pivot. Maya felt the second emotion shift from wounded disbelief to a cold, precise resolve. She could spend months fighting, years in legal filings while the company continued away from her, or she could act now in a way that kept her agency. She thought of the kitchen counter where the cufflink had been, brass catching the street lamp's glow. She thought of the night she had taken that cufflink from his desk. Concrete actions had always been her way to respond. Ethan, she said, and this time there was no pleading in her voice. I will not be cut out quietly. I will not sign anything that reduces my stake without explanation. I will call our attorney Monday, and I will not leave the company in the dark while you and your investors edit my life. Julian's mouth tightened. Olivia hovered and then retreated to gather her laptop. Ethan looked momentarily cornered. He raised his hands. Maya, that escalates this publicly. The board can't function on threats. I am not threatening, Maya replied. I am asking to be treated like a partner. A sudden interruption snapped all eyes to the doorway. A building staffer had entered and announced that the rooftop reception needed to clear in 15 minutes. The external event pushed them back into the functioning world. Lights shifted, servers started taking plates away, time intersected with the argument in a way that demanded movement. Outside the glass, the city kept its indifferent rhythm. Inside, the boardroom existed as the narrow place where a marriage and a company overlapped and now collided in signatures and clauses. Maya left the folder on the table and walked to the window. She watched Ethan for a long breath, the way someone checks a fracture to see if it will hold. Maya, Ethan finally, lower, as if trying to build a bridge. I never meant to erase you. I meant to make the company survive. We survived hunger together. Maya, we shared rent checks and midnight code reviews. You cannot tell me you protected us when you sold our voice for a clean cap table. He looked back at her with a softness that cut through the veneer. I know I lost sight of what mattered to you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm sorry. Her face softened for a beat. The apology landed and then dissipated because it wasn't attached to action. Not yet. You want, Ethan? I want the documents reopened. Maya, I want a seat in the decisions. If an investor wants a single public face, fine. But let it be transparent. Let me sign anything knowingly. If I have to step down from an operational role, I will do it with terms I agree to. Her voice was pragmatic. She was moving from shock to planning. Ethan pinched his fingers at the bridge of his nose. Maya, that risks the round. Julian will pull if he thinks I'm not in control. Nora stepped in now. Then show him you can be honest. Show him that inclusion doesn't equal chaos. Julian, you can speak honestly now. Are you asking for compliance or secrecy? Her question was a direct provocation. Julian's eyes narrowed. We are asking for clarity, Ms. Kim, not secrecy, but practical governance. He did not back down from his stake. The conversation shifted into negotiation and game theory. Papers got recoined into talking points. Maya listened and counted. She named specifics: board votes, veto rights, a public communications plan that would present Ethan as CEO without pretending she did not exist. Each concrete demand was a rod placed between them and the possibility that Julian could unilaterally reframe their story. When the meeting ended, no one left fully satisfied. Ethan's jaw was set. Julian left with a nod that promised further sessions. Olivia gathered the documents and placed them back in the folder, but not before Maya slipped her worn wedding band from her finger and set it on top of the signed contract. The small metal ring gleamed faintly under the boardroom light. Ethan saw the gesture and his face changed to something that might have been regret. He took a step, reaching for the ring, but Maya closed her hand around it. No, she said, not yet. Outside, rain started to fall in a steady fine line. The building's entrance glistened. Ethan left through a side door and walked to a waiting taxi without turning back. Maya stood with Nora at the glass wall and watched the taxi's brake light disappear into the street. Her hands were wet from rain the way a person's sleeves might be after running to catch a bus. She didn't realize she stepped outside until a cold droplet struck her cheek. They walked in silence to the sidewalk under the street lamp where the rain caught on her shoulders and made the gold of her locket darker. The folder with the signed document sat in her bag like a weight she had been carrying all night. Nora did not pry. She only rubbed Maya's shoulder with a contact that said she would help sort the next steps. On the curb, Maya slid her fingers inside the folder, found the page with her name, and with a deliberate motion she took off the wedding band and placed it inside. It was an act without proclamations. The band clicked softly against the paper. She closed the folder and locked it with the small latch Olivia had left flipped open. It was a simple, concrete boundary. Not closure, but an acknowledgement that for now she was marking a limit. They took a cab home. Dawn arrived over the river with a wash of pink that made the city look thin and honest. Maya sat at the kitchen table in the small apartment she and Ethan had once shared, the one where they had spent long, tired nights mapping user flows and meal plans on napkins. She spread the folder on the table. The light from the window fell across the pages and made the signatures legible and final. Nora leaned in. "You can take this to your attorney. We can file temporary injunctions if needed. You can ask for board mediation." Her list of options was practical and immediate, a set of tools rather than platitudes. Maya nodded. She opened her locket and looked at the photograph again, the two of them laughing over a flour-dusted table. Then she set it beside the folder and pulled out her phone. She called a small neighborhood entrepreneur she had met months earlier at a community pitch night and arranged a meeting to discuss a pilot collaboration. "Can you meet tomorrow morning at the cafe on Ninth?" she asked. She closed the folder in the drawer and turned the small key. The drawer clicked shut. Her fingers brushed the wood. The motion was mundane and precise. Nora sat across from her, stirring her coffee with a spoon that chimed against porcelain. "What's your move?" Nora quietly. "I call my attorney. Mayor, I set up a legal review. I ask for a mediation meeting with Julian present. And I talk to the entrepreneur about a pilot partnership. I will not be erased by a signed page." She listed actions rather than feelings. That was how she would rebuild. Through decisions, over the next days, Maya filed the initial documents for review and asked Olivia for all drafts that led to the signatures. Olivia provided them with reluctant thoroughness, producing email chains and notes that revealed layers of investor pressure and Ethan's repeated assurances that transparency would follow. With each email, Maya's understanding sharpened. She found explicit suggestions from Julian about minimizing family narratives and a private note where Ethan wrote, "We will figure out how to tell her." The note was a small knife of a thing, an admission that the action was planned and that the apology had been deferred. Maya met the entrepreneur at the cafe on Ninth. She carried the locket in her palm under the table and spoke plainly about a pilot that would let her retain a stake while moving into product strategy with independent oversight. The entrepreneur listened, asked about margins and pushed on timelines. The conversation was ordinary and full of possibility. It was not a love scene. It was a professional negotiation that returned her to the activity she did well, making concrete things happen. Nora stopped by the apartment with a stack of legal forms and an old pair of comfortable sneakers. "You might need these for court runs," she said. Her humor lightened the edges. They worked through lists. Contact the attorney, request board minutes, set a mediation meeting, draft a temporary restraining order on unilateral changes. Each item was a small win added to the ledger of larger change. Maya wrote emails that used names and dates and attached scanned copies of the signed papers. She did not use magnanimous sentences, she used facts. Ethan responded with a text that read, "Can we talk?" He called once, and when Maya did not pick up, he left a message that was short. "I made mistakes. Let's talk in the office Tuesday." On Tuesday, they met in a conference room with sunlight that slid across the table. Across from them sat Julian Park and Olivia, and the mediator the company had brought on to keep conversations from collapsing. The meeting lasted 3 hours. At times it felt like two separate conversations, one about ownership percentages and another about their marriage and how public life had reshaped private language. Then apologized in measured words. "I thought I was protecting the company and you. I see now that I handled this without you." "I'm sorry," her name slowly with an attempt at sincerity. "Maya, I'm sorry." Maya listened. Then she spoke in lists and clauses. "I accept the apology in principle. But apologies don't change documents. I need the legal commitments that restore my seat at the table or a written exit package that preserves my financial stake and autonomy." She the words without theatricality. Julian finally agreed to open the documents for revision if Maya would sign a confidentiality attachment and agree to a staged public narrative that named Ethan as the CEO while acknowledging Maya's founder role behind the scenes. It was not everything Maya wanted, but it was a compromise that kept her voice present. Olivia handed over an amendment sheet and a stamped commitment to reinstate Maya as a voting member of the board with a formal title that came with defined oversight powers. The papers promised a communication plan that would not erase her. Maya signed some forms marking what she would accept. She refused other clauses that would lock her into silence. When they left, Nora wrapped her arm through Maya's and said, "You did not lose yourself tonight, Maya. You redefined where you stand." She smiled, bright and candid. Maya thought about that phrasing. She had not wanted to be redefined by investors or by Ethan's decisions. She had wanted a say, she had wanted to be seen. The legal changes were a start. She had also placed her wedding band in the folder earlier to mark a boundary. Now, with revisions on the table, she put the band back on her finger slowly. It slid on, heavy and unfamiliar. The gesture was not about reconciliation, it was a practical choice about where she stood in the days to come. A week later, Maya met the entrepreneur again and signed the pilot agreement for a product feature that would place her in product strategy outside the company's executive operations. The pilot was modest but meaningful. It gave her a workspace, a schedule, clients to call, and, most important, an autonomy that belonged to her alone. She picked up the locket before leaving the cafe and clipped it back onto her chain. The photograph inside looked the same, and that steadied her. At night, she sat at the small kitchen table and wrote a short plan. Legal counsel, mediation, pilot project milestones, and a schedule for weekly conversations with Ethan where transparency would be required. She sent it to Olivia and to the mediator and asked for concrete dates. The plan had no grand speeches. It had deadlines. Ethan called that evening. If they could have dinner in 2 weeks to talk about what a shared future might look like under new terms. She considered the question. Ethan, she said, we can meet, but I need to see actions, not words. The legal changes need to be implemented first, he agreed. Her name again with a softness she could not disregard. May I thank you? Nora watched her friends with careful eyes at the cafe where they had celebrated small victories. You fought through signatures, she said. That counts. Maya tapped the locket and then slid it back under her shirt. She felt the warm weight of it near her heart. The contract had been signed on paper, and in response she had made a series of choices that held her to a direction. Regain agency, preserve financial fairness, and keep the possibility of rebuilding their life together on terms that included her. The signed folder sat in the top drawer of her kitchen table. She closed the drawer and turned the key. The action was exactly what it was. She stored the evidence where she could access it, and she placed a physical limit between the theft of voice and the work of recovery. She did not declare victory. She did not make grand promises. She sent a short message to Nora that read, "Thank you for holding me steady." Nora answered with a sticker and a plan for a celebratory dinner on Friday. Maya set the phone down, the room quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She felt resolve in her limbs, like a muscle warming up for action. At dawn the next day, she walked to the corner cafe where the entrepreneur often brought sketches and receipts. She ordered coffee and left the locket visible on her chain. A small, practical life was in motion. The decisions she had made in the boardroom echoed into the days that followed. Legal meetings, mediated sessions, a pilot project, small public notes that kept her name attached to her work. Each action rebuilt what had been altered by a signed page. When a week passed and the mediator confirmed the amendments had been logged with counsel and that a public release would acknowledge Maya's founder role without misrepresenting the board's leadership, she allowed herself a brief private exhale. She did not let drama fill the space. She made calls, set appointments, and replied to messages with clear sentences. One evening, Ethan came to her apartment to pick up a sweater he had forgotten. They exchanged a small conversation at the doorway. Practical logistics and a brief, honest look at one another. Maya, I'm working on the trust I broke, he said. Actions matter most. She answered. He nodded. He touched the back of his neck. I know. They each walked away with the sweater under one arm and something like a promise that would need time and proof to become true. The marriage had not been repaired in a single act, nor had it been destroyed by one signed page. The legal changes had removed the immediate erasure. The work remaining was practical, slow, and chosen. Back at the kitchen table, she opened the top drawer, took the folder, and slid her wedding band into the small envelope she had labeled evidence. She sealed it and placed it back into the drawer, then turned the key. The click of the lock was concrete. She set the locket on the table and smoothed the photograph with her fingertip. Outside, the city lights buzzed and the rain had stopped. Inside, Maya made a list for the morning. Call the attorney, check in with the mediator, update the pilot milestones. She wrote 3 items and stopped. She felt tired and steady, not triumphant. She poured a cup of coffee and took a long sip, tasting bitterness and warmth. She had been betrayed, she had acted, and she had reclaimed agency through documents, negotiation, and measured choices. The folder in the top drawer was both proof and promise. The final decision, whether to rebuild the marriage fully, to divorce, or to redefine partnership, would take time and evidence. For tonight, she closed the drawer and let the house settle around her measured steps. The last thing she did before bed was put the locket back on and slide the small envelope with the wedding band under the folder. Then she turned off the lamp and lay down, knowing the next day would be filled with more actions rather than speeches. The chapter ended with a door closing and a key turning. The drawer in her kitchen locked, the signed folder inside, and the band placed where she could reach it if she needed to prove a claim or to remember what she had chosen. The moment was plain, concrete, and final in its own way.